Is Stand Up the best album by Jethro Tull? That will be the topic of the video today. I'll first give you some background on the album. I'll talk about the song that Ian Anderson hated, how the new guitar player influenced the direction of the band and possibly responsible for their fame, how they auditioned a few guitar players, one of whom could have turned the band into the first heavy metal band, how the change in their musical direction set the blueprint for the sound they would be known for. Let's talk about the unique design of the album cover that made it stand out from the crowd. And lastly, meanings behind some of the songs, such as who really was the Fat Man. For some background, the album was released in 1969. I found two conflicting release dates online, which was either July 25th or August 1st. So it was one of those dates, but it's celebrating 55 years. It was very successful, as it was #1 in the UK album charts a week after the release. It was due to the single Living in the Past, which was released in May of 1969. Ian Anderson has expressed mixed feelings about the song, as he considers the lyrics to be some of the worst he has ever written. He also rushes through the song's performance during live shows, and some fans have even complained about this. And here's some more interesting trivia. The song was not even on the original album. It was not until 2001 that they included it as a bonus track on the remastered version. Since then, there have been more remasters released, such as the 2010 Collector's Edition and the 2016 Steven Wilson remix. Let me go into some history with the band. This is their second album. The first album was released in 1968 called This Was. Back then, the band had a different sound. They played a mix of blues rock, folk rock, and jazz fusion. There was one person who was a major influence in their sound, and that was guitarist Mick Abrahams. He was the original guitarist for the band, but only played on their debut album. Mick Abrahams was a blues-based guitarist, and he wanted the band to follow in that direction, like they did on the album This Was. But there was a problem. During the summer of 1969, Ian Anderson had already been writing music for the next album. It was estimated that he already wrote about half the new album. But this new music was not the blues-based music that they had been playing, so Mick Abrahams was not really happy with this. So Mick Abrahams was out of the band. Now, I'm not sure if he was fired or quit. It appears he was fired, but Mick claims he quit. So for the purpose of this video, let's just say he was out of the band. Now, this was for a few reasons. One was the direction of the band, moving from the blues style to the more folk rock and hard rock style. So being that he was a blues purist, he ended up forming his own band called Blood Wind Pig. Another reason was the fact that their producer, Terry Ellis, wanted Ian Anderson to be the frontman of the band, and if this happened, Mick Abrahams would have less of a share in the songwriting. A third reason was the fact that Mick did not want to travel internationally or play more than 3 times a week. So it was now time for the band to find another guitarist. They then began to audition new guitar players. The first one was David O'List, who played with an English progressive rock band called The Nice. But he only lasted a week. He just ghosted the band, or the 60s version of ghosting, by not showing up for practice. The next guitarist they approached was Mick Taylor. He turned him down because he had already been offered a place in a bigger band. Not the one you think. It was actually John Mayall in the Blues Breakers. He joined the Rolling Stones after that. And they found another guitarist who was playing for a band named Earth. It was Tony Iommi, and the band Earth eventually became Black Sabbath. Tony played with Jethro Tull for a brief period, but went back to Earth, no pun intended, and eventually would invent heavy metal with Black Sabbath. So could you imagine how the course of history would have been changed if Jethro Tull invented heavy metal? Now, I think of that and I think of, imagine Slayer with a flute player. That's what I came up with. But I'm sure somewhere in a parallel universe, it might have happened that way. But the next person I found would end up being their longtime guitar player and a major influence on the band, and that is Martin Barre, who actually auditioned around the same time as Tony Iommi, but he asked for a second audition, so he brought another element to the band. Martin Barre has more of this hard rock style, while Ian Anderson brought his folk music influence, and thus the Jethro Tull sound was born. Now it was time for the band to start recording the album Stand Up in April of 1969. They had to take a short break in the recording schedule because they did a brief tour with the band 10 years after. But after this, they went back to the recording studio. They had a very rigid recording schedule. They basically treated it as a 9-to-5 job. They recorded at Morgan Studios, and this studio had some equipment that the band was not very familiar with. which at the time was very state-of-the-art. It was the 8-track recording equipment, which facilitated the recording process. They also said that their recording engineer, Andy Johns, was a big help to the band, and he was easy to work with. Most of the songs were recorded live with the entire band with very little overdubs. The acoustic songs were recorded alone by Ian Anderson. There was one song that was very difficult to record, but the hard work would eventually pay off as it became one of the most popular songs played live. I'm talking about the song Bourrée, which is a cover song of a classical music piece written by Johann Sebastian Bach in the 1700s. Now it's time to design the album cover. The band wanted something that would stand up, and I mean literally stand up. So they met a woodcarver named James Grashow, who designed the wood carving styled album cover. The original album was a gatefold album. I don't have a physical copy of it, but I'll show you some pictures on the screen. It was designed like a children's pop-up book showing the band. This pop-up design was discontinued in 1973, but the 2017 Steven Wilson vinyl reissue has this design. Let's talk about the musical style. The band did not completely abandon their blues style. The first track, A New Day Yesterday, had a blues sound, but they also started to use different instruments. So, for example, the song Fat Man has a mandolin, and the song Jeffrey Goes to Leicester Square uses balalaika, which is a Russian stringed instrument. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. They also had some harder jazz rock in the album with the song Nothing Is Easy. Some of the songs on the album were based on personal experiences. For example, back then Ian Anderson had a strained relationship with his parents, and this was expressed in the songs Back to the Family and 4,000 Mothers. For example, the song Back to the Family includes the line, I'll get a train back to the city, that sort life get me down, there's more fun away from the family, get some action when I pull into town, showing that he enjoyed being away from his family. Then there was the song 4,000 Mothers, which begins with a line, do you hear mother saying I'm wrong, but I know I'm right, which implies that his mother was constantly criticizing him. There were also a few songs about personal relationships, but according to Ian Anderson, they were made-up stories, as Ian Anderson did not want to write about real relationships in songs. We can leave that to Taylor Swift, who would make a career out of it 50 years later. But there were a few songs that were about real people. Jeffrey Goes to Leicester Square is about Ian Anderson's friend, Jeffrey Hammond, which is the second song about his friend, the first one being a song for Jeffrey from the album This Was. Jeffrey Hammond would eventually become the bass player and was part of the band from 1971 to 1975. It would have been interesting if Jeffrey Hammond played the Hammond organ, but that probably happened in another parallel universe. But you may be wondering, who really was the Fat Man? Well, the song was about Mick Abrahams, who was a rather corpulent individual. So they wrote the song about him, most likely out of spite because he left the band. In conclusion, is it their best album? I would say it's one of the best, along with greats like Aqualung and Thick as a Brick. But I think it's the most important album because it's the first album with Martin Barr, and it's the album where they solidified their sound. Let me know what you think of Stand Up. It has always been one of my personal favorites. If you want to see where I rank this album, check out this ranking video I did right here, which includes all their albums, including the most recent one. Thanks for watching. Please give this video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. You can find me on Facebook and TikTok, and I upload additional material on those sites. Links are in the video description. I'll see you in the next one.